All those poor people who are desperate to be on Benjamin's show, and I just go on Benjamin's show just to kind of
Yeah.
chat. And there's all these people who are like, I need just one show and I could tell my life story. And I'm like,
Yeah.
please chat about food.
Oh, it would actually be really appropriate because I think I'm going to have to reach over and stir this thing every half an hour,
What is it?
Oh, what are you
which isn't
making?
terribly professional. Carnitas?
Oh,
I didn't
Wow.
realize it needed quite so much babysitting, but it needs a little babysitting.
So you are
I made
taking
a
my
curry the
advice
other day
to
that I
up your
forgot.
meat intake.
I think people have no idea how much meat I eat. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anitas.
Yeah. There's no good Mexican food here. And
In Montreal, there's no good Mexican food in Montreal, in a city of 3 million people. You're kidding me.
I've tried everything that I have heard of.
There's got to
So-
be good Mexican food in Montreal.
I have to make the good Mexican food.
Fair enough.
Happy Pride.
Yeah. So, it's not directed at me.
Hey, you're the resident gay guy.
Yeah,
Actually, you're not gay, you're
it
a
is.
homo.
It's a happy pride.
Yeah.
It's going.
Is
It's
it?
going very well. Oh, thank you. I think it's going quite well. Yeah. I mean, we've had what? We've had Bud Light. We've had the Oxfam thing just now. Oxfam have climbed down, seemingly.
You mean they cut that one
Okay, wait, hold on.
image?
I don't know what we're talking. What's
They call,
Oxfam?
yeah, you're right. You're right.
Tell the
Okay,
story.
Oh, go ahead, Eliza. Do you
no,
want to
no,
tell
no,
it?
no. I didn't watch the video. I just saw the clip.
Oh, they did. Yeah, they did a video. Well, I didn't watch the whole video, but they did a video, and it had a horrendous caricature of somebody, and it had a badge on that said "turf," and all these people said, "Oh, it looks like J.K. Rowling." Which my first thing was, that's really harsh because J.K. Rowling's really attractive, and it's this really haggard character. But then there's a source photograph where the clothing
Yeah.
and the color and just the whole
And the
thing. It's
hair.
like that's a source. If you've done any graphic design, you can tell a source photograph. Like you sent that to this team of people, so they've
What is that?
provided this-
Oxfam? Is this like a department store? It's something British.
No, Oxfam's an old British charity. It's Oxford Famine Relief.
Really?
So they've strayed a bit.
They strayed a bit. Yeah, like every town would have had at least 2 Oxfam stores, like thrift stores, charity shops, we would call
Oh,
them.
so it's like Salvation
They
Army.
would be. Yeah, but yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It is a lot like Salvation Army, actually, because it's probably, if you said to people, name a charity, Oxfam would be the top of the list. But,
Yeah, when I was trying to move to the UK many years ago and was looking for jobs that would hire someone who has no skill sets, that's one of the places that I
Well,
looked.
that's
And
not
now,
true.
okay, none of the skill sets for which countries import immigrants.
No. Okay. I won't argue with you on that.
Yeah.
And think what you've missed. You could be in an office with somebody who
Yeah.
thinks like that.
No, it's just it seems like every place that I ever thought of working when I was in my 20s has now become so odious to me that I have I feel like I'll just be unemployable. Yeah. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
whether I like it or not, I have to stay in the academy.
Really?
I mean, I don't really have a plan beyond permagrad student. We'll see.
Peter Pan, do it.
Yeah.
Stay at school forever.
Yeah. I don't have a plan to substitute for the library access without which I cannot live. Yeah.
I know people who've stayed in degrees simply to keep their Athens access. And they've got no interest in doing the degree, and then they end up having to write a thesis because they're like, I suppose I got to complete this degree just to get the Athens card. It's ridiculous. You'd think they'd sell them. People would happily pay hundreds per year. Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. There has to be a better way.
Anyway, I think Pride's going very nicely. From what I hear, I don't have any first-hand experience of it because it doesn't happen here. But it seems to be, well, it doesn't happen anywhere where I would see it, but it seems to be more and more people are aware of what's going on. I think that's good.
When's the last time you went to Pride? Either of you? I've never gone. I've always, well, one, I don't like crowds, and then gay crowds are even more disturbing to me.
Bit homophobic. In Pride Month. I've never been to Pride.
Oh. Eliza probably.
I think I probably went drinking in Pride weekend, but I wasn't part of a parade or a march or anything like that. Yeah, it was basically an excuse to go drinking, as far as I recall, back in the day.
So anything would do. Yeah. I think I've gone a couple of times. I used to take photos of all the protests in the city where I lived and all of the like big events and.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have like a coffee table book of like the decay of the West kind of style?
You know, it didn't start out that way, but now I have a lot of material. No, it was like, you know, if you're kind of an introvert and you're not that great at plugging into things, to take photographs of them is a good way to like be part of the scene. So that's probably how it started, and then it became something else. I'll probably go here. Well, at a certain point, it became more purely anthropological.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you didn't get the desired effect of helping you bond with these people. You actually became like you were a student of them almost.
I mean,
I haven't Goodall of Antifa.
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't gone I probably haven't gone since 2016. So.
Yeah. What happened in 2016 that scared you straight?
I don't even remember. I remember that was the first year that it felt really family unfriendly.
Interesting.
Huh.
Yeah. But
what do you mean by that? Do you mean sexualized?
Yeah, like super sexualized.
I'm surprised you put it that recently. I thought that had been good. Well, maybe it depends where.
I mean, okay, so there was like, I lived in California, and I didn't go to this, but I had coworkers who did like the Folsom Street Fairs there. And
right, that's
like,
kind of different.
That's a little different. I had this coworker who I really adored, who was this gay guy, and the weekend after the Monday after the Folsom Street Fair, he came back to work, and he looked like he had just gotten off of like the craziest roller coaster in the world and was like, I've seen so many dicks. He had that 1,000-yard stare. Like,
the 1,000-dick stare. That's really bad. In public. I don't understand
it's San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's everywhere now. Just full sexual license. What, Eliza?
Yeah, so you guys spent a lot of time together in Ireland.
We did. We chain smoked and drank.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was everyone was being very polite around me and not planning. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you can imagine people wouldn't want to plan because they didn't know if I'd feel well or not. So it kind of, I think it's like the party kind of accidentally followed me and I didn't really know. And so everyone was just kind of shaping around me and getting their accommodation around me and stuff. And I was a bit oblivious because I was just a bit like, oh. Yeah. Did you enjoy it? You must have enjoyed it, the time here. Yeah. Yeah. You looked like you had a ball.
Or Eliza.
Oh, I think you. Oh, me.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm. Yeah, me too. I feel like I didn't have much time with either of you guys. But I think you were the one who said this. You were like, it seems a little bit cruel that you finally meet all of these people in the real, in the real world. And then you have 5 minutes with them.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
I know, it's really frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. It made me realize how much we could all achieve if we all lived in the same place. Like, just imagine that. All these people working together, if you literally all lived kind of within 5 minutes of one another.
Yeah, you can see why the UK has got so much done.
Mm.
Yeah, because there's that whole thing of people being able to drive to see somebody else within basically a day, more or less.
Yeah.
How did you find the WPATH conference, Eliza? What was your
EPATH?
EPATH, yeah, sorry. Whatever, all paths lead to WPATH.
Lead to trouble.
Yes.
It was interesting.
Snippy.
It was interesting. I mean, it really showed like how much kind of the state of the discourse had deteriorated since with WPATH, because like genocide was not front and center at WPATH and it was front and center at EPATH. So that wasn't encouraging.
It's just such a weird sentence.
Yeah, it was this, and it all, like, as with everything with trans activism, there is this weird combination of like, is it genocidal or is it uncool, you know? And you kind of want to have it both ways, so that if people are going to hook onto the genocide argument, you have that. And if people are going to be more motivated by like being really hip, you have that too.
It's hip to be trans.
Right. But it's also like just, I mean, the stuff about like Turks being dinosaurs, and at that crazy McGill event that trans activists shut down, I remember this girl who was, 1 minute she was inside with everybody else screaming about genocide and trying to like, you know, not rip us apart exactly, but it was like lives depended on us not getting into this talk. And then 10 minutes later, she's outside standing behind these two women who had wanted to go to the talk and were giving an interview. And she's walking around and she's flapping her arms and she's squawking like, boring, boring. And it's like, pick one.
How old was she?
Oh, she was probably 19, 20.
Yeah, pick one.
So EPATH was also like, okay, but pick one. And it's disturbing to have the president of EPATH, like the centerpiece of his keynote address was very defensive, which was an interesting choice. Especially because the keynote of the WPATH conference had been so like evangelical.
Mm-hmm.
And in EPATH, it was really like, well, we respect everybody's freedom of speech, but we choose not to listen to it. And we don't hire flat earthers in geology departments, so draw your own conclusions, and nobody's being canceled. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Eliza,
and it all kind of proceeded like that.
Without you unveiling or revealing just how connected you are pretty connected to a number of different counter movements, or at least organizations and stuff. From your point of view, how is the dissident or the counter revolutionary force shaping up?
I mean, I think that's probably a better question for Alasdair, who's actually organizing.
Well, Alice, I mean, yeah, but you are connected.
Yeah, but
Eliza.
more globally is the question you're asking. You're kind of saying,
yeah. Well, I guess both of you,
total.
Yeah,
from both of your points of view. I'm just wondering, like, how the footing is changing, and
If you'd asked me until about 2 hours ago, I would have been really bleak. I was bleak this morning about.
Why were you bleak this morning?
I don't know, just because I saw something and it was just so overwhelmingly that the answers were just. It was something on Twitter and the answers were incredibly just ill-informed. It was just the stuff that we keep hearing, over and over again, and you think, God, how many decades is it going to take to get through to all of those people one by one by one by one by one? But now I don't feel that way. I think you can get a very distorted sense of this by looking at social media, and I should stop. But generally, at the moment, very positive, I think. Very different. It's a really different feeling from how it was.
What's your sense of why there's more of an opening now?
Because more people are prepared to talk about it like we are on camera with our real names. He says, but I think that makes a difference, doesn't it? Because it's like when you start to think, well, hold on a minute. I saw a thing today from Keith from Our Duty, and he said, like, maybe we should just name and shame these surgeons. And I kind of thought about it, and I thought, okay, my surgeon was called I've forgotten his first name, but if I knew it, I'd say it. His surname's Flood. Like, I don't have any problem saying why would I have a problem saying my surgeon's name? He's a surgeon. He should be standing by his work. Why are we using phrases like name and shame about a surgery that we're being told is legitimate? And I think that whole vibe, you kind of go into this with this very clandestine thing because of the power of the TRAs. You're sort of coming in a very clandestine way. And then suddenly you catch yourself on, as the Irish say. You have moments where you think, hold on a minute, this is absurd. Why would we cover the identity of a surgeon who's not doing anything illegal? Because we think it's wrong. So we should say, this is the name of this surgeon. So there's moments like that where I do think possibly there's been this...
Alasdair, you have a fly on your head. Okay, it flew off. There was a fly on your temple for the last minute or so. Sorry.
You have to interrupt me. This house is full of flies, and I can't do anything about it because you can't use fly spray around cats or dogs.
Fly spray? I've never heard of fly spray.
Yeah, fly killer.
Oh.
Can you get those zapper tennis racket things?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I have no three-dimensional vision.
Oh, yeah, you're...
That's a barrier.
Yeah. I just end up hitting myself repeatedly. Yeah, okay. What about you, Eliza? What do you reckon? Where are we?
So I do think that... I think that there are positive and negative spirals, and that until recently we were in this negative spiral where people would speak out and experience massive consequences, and other people would interpret that either as a sign that, like, the punishment, the seriousness of the punishment means that the crime was very serious, or would interpret it as, okay, I can't possibly afford to speak out. And that can be this negative cycle where people are more and more and more reserved with in expressing entirely sane opinions and facts that everybody knew until 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that we do seem to be in a cycle where people are being more and more open. And part of it is just like, I think Helen Joyce has referred to it as Operation Let the Trans Activists Speak, and how well it's going. Like, part of it is that there's been much more exposure to these arguments, and people who were maybe inclined to give the benefit of the doubt would now really struggle to do that. It's like, okay, no, it really, like, I was willing to grant that there might be something there that I don't understand, that nobody's expressing very well. But after you hear the 100th parent, like, activist parent of a transgender child say, well, she always loved poofy ballerina skirts, like, you realize that there's just no there. I think a lot of people are hitting that point. And I also think that it is getting... 5 years ago, it was possible for most people to avoid the subject. And now not only is it, it's Pride Month, so it's particularly loud.
Yeah.
But this is part of almost everybody's social circle that I talk to. They will know someone who has transitioned. And in almost every case, that means that they will know someone whose experience disproves the things that we are supposed to believe about transition and coming out as trans, and how authentic and liberating that is. And that counts for something too.
So we're in a positive, we're in an up spiral.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, about hosting events in the US and how to break through in the US. And I really don't know the answer to that.
The US is going to be different.
Yeah.
And Canada, I don't think there's anything.
Canada we just have to wait for the Canadians to work out that the way they can be less like America. They'll work it out eventually. They'll go like, because everything they do just seems to be positioned against America, right? No, I think you're American, aren't you, Eliza?
I am American, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's...
So go ahead.
It will almost be... Well, do you know what I mean? It's like, no offence to Ireland, but the situation in Ireland will be determined by what happens in Britain and by the tipping point of people. Because in Ireland, the left wants to position itself against, they're kind of pro-trans because they're not TERF Island, right? But then you hit the tipping point where people start to realize what that actually means. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Canada will be like that, or maybe Canada will be like the last redoubt of trans stuff and the rest of the world will just move on. I could believe that too.
Canada. And New Zealand and Australia are pretty deep in the pockets of the movement too.
Well, Australia seems to be experiencing a few fractures.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both politically, and then the really interesting thing, and I wonder if this will spread, was that like the health insurer thing that came out a couple of weeks ago, which was like, we're not going to have the backs of doctors who are transitioning kids because the evidence just isn't there. Like that kind of.
Who did that? Which insurance?
It was. Do you know?
Was it?
I know that that's the one that failed in Texas, but I saw it pass somewhere else. But which country?
In Australia, it was. It was like malpractice insurance, or maybe just health insurance. It was like, we're not going to cover these things, and we're not going to cover. Was
it one state in Australia, or was it Australia?
I think it's a company. She said.
I think it must have been.
I think it was a big company, but I guess we're just speculating.
Okay.
I don't know anything about how the Australian health insurer, but I know that that's the kind of thing that they've been trying to introduce in Texas, and
yes. And
it's going to be very interesting because suddenly then you've got a different group of people who want to know how many detransitioners there are. And they're not people who want to know how many detransitioners there are so that they can prove that child transition is wrong. And there's not people who want to know how many detransitioners there are so they can prove that nobody detransitions. It's people who want to know how many detransitioners there are so they can audit and make recommendations about how much insurance will cost. So then we could suddenly start to see a very, very different number, in theory, come out, because we might start hearing the real percentage, whatever that is.
Yeah, and that seems like one of the ways to take the knees out from under this in the US in particular. And that was what took the steam out of the satanic panic. Was
really
like insurers stopped, like it was kind of two-pronged. So there were lawsuits that were brought by families who had been, falsely accused, or by people who had been falsely accused of participating in the satanic panic for which there wasn't evidence. And the other side was that health insurers stopped covering the kinds of intensive therapy, like many hours every week for these patients, in which these kinds of stories incubated and emerged and were sustained. Like that took a lot of one-on-one contact with believer therapists to sustain. When it wasn't covered anymore,
be interesting to see if that happens with gender dysphoria.
Yeah. But I think it's going to have this long afterlife, even if it crashes in popularity. It's like once an idea that's this compelling, that explains this many different kinds of suffering, kind of gets into the water, and you don't get that back out again.
It's so. As a theory, it so conforms to Occam's razor, right? It's just wrong. But it's like, it explains so much in the world with one. It's so elegant that you can see that it's just elegantly wrong. But it is a very elegant theory. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very powerful metaphor for a deep sense of wrong. Like, it's very appealing.
Very Gnostic.
Very Gnostic.
It's a Gnostic heresy. I can transcend the physical body by a process of mental gymnastics, purify myself.
Pride Month is really genuinely like a secular holiday now, isn't it?
Oh, it's not secular.
I know it's not.
It's just a series of holy days.
Just holiday, but it's but it's. Have you got days off for it yet?
No.
Not even in Canada.
No. Yeah, no, actually.
But I think here we have like Pride Summer and not just Pride Month. It's really bad.
Pride season, yeah. No, that is a good question, because we have days off for Juneteenth for the end of slavery. I guess it's a non-work holiday, so it's not quite a bank holiday. but then we have
It's a good job considering the topic.
The Columbus Day will eventually turn into Indigenous Peoples Day, and so yeah, we need to have an official gay day on a bank level. But we just have so many gay days. They're all Hallmark days. It's like day of dangly nut visibility. Just like it's just going to go further and further and further.
There are 145 now, I read.
Yeah.
145
nearly half the year.
145.
Yeah.
There's 145, when you add them all up. Various, pansexual visibility days and all the rest of it.
I wonder
went through the whole internet. I mean, that's not notable, right? That includes stuff that like 2 people know about it. But.
Yeah. I wonder if there's an accelerationist prong to this, like really just make it more and more and more religious openly. You are being pronging yourself?
The accelerationist. I'm totally an accelerationist.
Yeah.
On nearly all of these issues. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think if people are going to do it, then they should do it with confidence, and they should say no. I think accelerationism would sort out the women's sport issue without as many young women losing places over the course of years. Mm-hmm. It would look uglier, but it would resolve it in, let's say, a year, because there is a real risk if it goes on for 10 years that young women just collectively as a generation just give up on sport.
Yeah.
Because they just can't be bothered with it's not even the unfairness. That's the second stage. It's just the of the whole thing, the situation, just everyone kind of being aware of it. And I'm in favor of, I would totally, if I could see the benefit, for example, of a whole bunch of guys coming in and qualifying and kicking all the women out and then refusing to race. So the race doesn't happen, because then you get the sponsors. And so far that hasn't happened organically. But I'm also aware that how unfair it would be to do that.
Well, I mean, so there have been a couple of like kind of trollish cases where guys identify as girls for weightlifting. I think the guy named Zuby, and then another guy did it recently. But if men collectively did that, like as a intentional troll, like an entire high school class, they just kind of totally troll the system. Kind of like that guy with the big things up in who turned out to maybe be a troll. We never figured out what happened with him, but he eventually got fired. The shop teacher
he was kind of daring them to sack him. Basically,
he was kind of accelerationist in a way. I mean, like that's pretty egregious, but I guess it's got to be pretty egregious.
There's acceleration, and then there's airbags that big. Yeah. I think that one of the problems is that I think that there are a lot of solutions to that particular issue which put around whether the guys slightly get to sit out of it. And okay, so you can look at that from a fairness point of view, but then I would also argue that generally, particularly among young people, young men are going to be better trolls. And this situation needs the crap trolling out of it, and they will be better trolls. Yeah. They'll be more confident and more aggressive, and I think.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your ProKiwi Farms moment, Alasdair?
Mm-hmm.
No. It is not.
Yeah.
No. Wasn't there an example of a whole bunch of young women boycotting a race? They were college students.
Yeah.
And then the school was just like, okay, well, none of you won then. And it didn't.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's why I think the men should boycott too. Or invade it with the consent and knowledge of the women for maybe 1 year.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Finish it off.
I feel like we need a website where everybody can submit subversive ideas to overturn gender ideology where you live right now. And you could just kind of pick and choose and be like, okay, I'm in a school. I can run pretty fast. You can find your niche.
Like GC Chan or something like that.
Oh gosh. Maybe not like that.
We need more Chans.
What other research have you been covering lately, Eliza? What have you been writing about?
What have I been writing about? I've been doing a lot of interviews since I got back from Ireland. And I've also been kind of going back to my thesis, which I had not worked on for a little while. I just had too much to do. So I've been writing about, which is really just like plowing through hundreds and hundreds of like Reddit posts that come up when you search for imposter syndrome and internalized transphobia and intrusive thoughts. So the things that I talked about at GenSpect. And just, I mean, it's a qualitative analysis, and you just take these posts and you're like, okay, here are all the things that seem to be going on here. And here are all the themes. And that's mostly what I've been doing.
Any particularly juicy moments? They're so juicy when you post them on Twitter.
I mean, there are things that I post on Twitter, like, those usually aren't the things that are coming up in my thesis. Like the thing about the woman who was who thought that she was stealth as a trans man, and so was freaking out because like her sister's boyfriend was going to go to the same dentist that like she had gone to when she was a kid. And it was just like, this is not the liberating, authentic life that like is sold to people. Like, passing is not all that it's cracked up to be. Like, I guess that's what I've been kind of looking into lately, is the experience of passing or thinking that you pass, and that it has been this kind of beautiful destination that most people who transition aren't going to reach. But, you know, you always might do it if you get the next surgery, if you stay on hormones for another 5 years, like maybe you'll get there. And it's like, boy, when you get there, like in the posts that I read about it, people will talk about, well, you know, physically I've never looked better, and I'm really happy with my surgeries, and like emotionally, like I feel like I just can't connect with anybody. And it's like, yeah, because like your entire life and everything that you've been through, including your transition, which has defined the last several years of your life, is something that you cannot share with other people. If you want to pass, you have cut yourself off from human contact.
Because even if the people around you are completely beautiful, the people from your past,
yeah,
they know. They still know.
And so that the kind of falsity that it inserts into relationships, and then, you know, you see people experiencing the cost of that falsity and not assigning it. And it's like, you asked everybody in your life to lie to you, and then you wonder why you feel like you're being lied to.
There's a concept that they say that people who shoplift for fun or whatever it is, I guess not fun, but, you know, like for the thrill of it. And there's a concept called Dupers Delight, which is the delight that you get in having duped somebody. That so there's a certain type of shoplifter, like a really rich person who doesn't lack the money but just wants to kind of get one over on other people, so can steal something and then feels like, you didn't see. And I wonder whether that's something you're seeing in the analysis of these data, or something you might look. Do you know what I mean? Is there a lot of people feeling quite victorious about passing?
I know what you mean, and I honestly expected to find more of it. And when I have wandered over to the like male to female subs, I have found more of it. But I mean, my research is really on the female population, and I don't see it. I don't see this like, oh wow, this is so great. Like I totally got this over on everybody, or like what you really see is
feelings of revenge.
No. Like I really. That is not the feelings of revenge specifically, but the feeling of succeeding at passing. It's so rare. Like there will be celebratory posts where will be like, TSA routed me through the mail scanners, and that's a celebration. But there's never like, you know, I feel really great that like in all of my life, nobody has any idea who I really am. It's. That's not how it comes out.
But you see that in the mail. It's easier for you to.
I do see some of that in the mail, but I don't watch those nearly as closely. Yeah.
I just interviewed Phil Illy for the second time, and he's written a book on autoheterosexuality, where he theorizes that there's autogynephilia and then autoandrophilia. And I think his work is pretty important because it really clearly states the sexual nature of motivations behind transition, and he builds a case based on research about the erotic aspect, or just the orientation of loving yourself as the opposite sex, or love your desire to be the opposite sex. And so far as I know, the main researchers, Michael Bailey and Ray Blanchard, they're not on board with the autoandrophilia, like the female component of eroticism in this. So I'm wondering if what you've seen with regards to sexual motivations for females.
Interesting.
Is it and we have to take into account that female sexuality is going to be kind of expressed differently than male sexuality. It's going to be a little bit more diffuse and subtle. So I'm wondering, like, what component, like, if you look at the etiology of this mass of people that you've been studying on the female, like, to what degree is it erotic, and to what degree is it trauma? Like there's all these different things. So just with the erotic aspect, what is your perspective?
Yeah. So what I've noticed from the erotic side is that it seems there's a pretty common profile of, like, heterosexual girl who transitions, who is motivated by, and will freely admit this, and often will freely admit it and then express great self-consciousness about it, that they were inspired to identify as a gay trans man because of anime, because of reading erotic fan fiction about gay male relationships. This fan fiction is, of course, almost invariably written by women, so it's very relatable from the perspective of, like, female sexuality. And I think there's an extent to which, like, young women idealize gay relationships without having any idea what that's actually like or what male sexuality is actually like. But I think that a lot of young women see a gay male relationship as a relationship of equals, a relationship that doesn't have the same problems that are constantly on display of, like, the problems of heterosexuality. So it's a way to kind of tap into your sensuality, your desire for, like, romantic and sexual intimacy that doesn't feel as threatening as, like, having sex with a man and maybe you get pregnant and maybe he tries to strangle you in bed, you know?
Okay.
Like, there is, that seems to play a really big role among gay trans men. And I think the one place, I think that it sets those particular girls up to be incredibly vulnerable to, ironically, heterosexual men who are willing to pretend to be gay men.
Or bi.
Or bisexual men who are willing to pretend to be gay men. Because these girls are desperate for both, like, an intimate relationship with a male because they're heterosexual, and to be validated in their trans gay man identity. And a guy who does that, like, that's a pretty successful sexual strategy.
And would the posts you're reading give us enough information that you might be able to speculate about the age of the men who...
They usually seem to be, when ages are given, they tend to be pretty close in age.
Right.
I'm not seeing the kinds of age gaps that we often see with, like, gay boys who transition and are groomed.
Right.
It's much more like
So
opportunistic peers.
Okay, so it's kind of woke bro. It's like the guys Douglas Murray talked about who all went to the Pussy March and were very, very deferential. Then when the women left the room, they were all like, I'm going to bang so much pussy in this. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah. Huh. I think my sense
pretending
is
to be gay. Yeah. They're pretending to be gay so they can get sex with women. That's so odd.
And I mean, these women will post about it and they'll be like, you know, my boyfriend is gay and he's been really great because I'm not very far into my transition yet. And he doesn't even mind, like, you know, using my frontal. He said it was fine. It's, you know, it's more convenient. And it's like, he's heterosexual. The level of delusion is extreme.
More convenient.
Have you seen, and it's probably really difficult to find these, if a woman goes down that path and then starts to feel regret and starts to examine, like, how she's feeling and then backs out of it, like, her posts aren't going to be as available anymore because she's going to get kicked out because the confirmation bias and the echo chamberiness. But where do you see like that? So have you traced that? Like how
that kind of trajectory of coming out of that identification?
Yeah. Or delusion.
Yeah. I mean, those kinds of, there are women who fit that profile who show up some years later on like the detransition subreddit and are able to, like, they'll acknowledge the role that fan fiction and the role that fantasy and fantasizing about a gay relationship had in their identification. And I think that I think it's understandable. Like but it's also, it has this, in so many cases, it has this completely like untested quality of, like young people who have no life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for every woman who is out there with a gay male boyfriend, that there what are there 3 or 4 who have never had any kind of romantic, it seems it's the kind of, it's like the whole identity is a fan fiction.
Yeah. It's just, it's nature with extra steps. Like there was because it's Pride Month, Glamour UK published a photo shoot and then an interview with a pregnant man. And the Rad Femme critique was that why are trans women celebrated for starting businesses and trans men celebrated for having babies? And it's a crude thought. I mean, no, it's not a crude thought. Like my reaction is, it's just nature with extra steps. Of course, we're going to adulate pregnancy, and of course, we're going to adulate masculine ambition. It doesn't matter if you swap the genders. It's like our primary values are still that the power of giving birth is supreme. And the power of building business is really admirable. And it doesn't matter if you wear a dress or you grow a beard. We're still going to like look at the basic human. It's just humanity, human nature with extra steps. And it kind of that's contentious because it kind of gives the lie to the feminist. If we erase gender roles, we're going to stray from that. And I know you're more feministy than me, Eliza.
No, I can see that. The thing that I thought was so interesting about the Glamour magazine profile, and I would be so curious, like, what was going on a subconscious level with, like, the art direction of that photo shoot. So the cover is, this woman who identifies as a man, has had a mastectomy, is heavily, heavily pregnant, is naked, and has had painted very thinly over, like, the swollen womb, over everything, like, has had this suit and tie and shirt painted over her skin. And it's kind of like this fiction stretched very thinly over this reality, which is that this is not a miraculous pregnancy of like a man becoming pregnant. This was like, okay, woman had sex with man and pregnancy is the entirely predictable outcome. Even if one's a he and one's a they. Like this is not a holy mystery that should be venerated on a new holy day by the peasants who come in from the countryside.
So the person who impregnated him was them. Or that, yes. or the. Oh, okay. So she doesn't know who the father is what you're telling me. There are 2 candidates. I'm sorry, I refuse. I won't do it. I'm not going to pretend that the one person is they. Okay, right.
Huh.
It's interesting, actually, because there's been a couple of other trans pregnancy cases, and the partner is always something, which you don't know why that is. Is that because you have to be like that to be in a couple with somebody else? Or is it... you have to have some kind of special gender identity yourself, or is it, I don't know, is it competition? Do you know what I mean?
I think that my guess would be that it's more contagion than competition, which is if your partner buys into this belief system and forces you to participate in it as part of the condition of continuing the relationship, there's the extent to which, like, okay, you have to behave a certain way and then your cognitions follow your behaviors. And if you really start to behave this way, if you really start to believe those things, like, who is going to identify as just a plain vanilla man or woman?
Yeah.
if you really believe that like your partner is this super special unicorn person because they like, I don't even know, watch NASCAR or read books or don't read books, or I don't even.
So it's another variant of polite bisexuality, basically. It's another.
Maybe.
So one analysis that I want to explore more. I just spoke with Jason Bradley, who's been doing phenomenal research into the history of the idea of population control, Malthusianism, and how that is the bedrock of global governance, is to reduce population. And so if you start to look at it in that way, it makes a lot of sense why the government is completely behind LGBT plus stuff, because it's Darwinian. If you can convince the population that they're gay or that they're trans, then you can sterilize them, and then or they get sterilized, they adopt, and then they perpetuate that idea, and it'll just decrease population. So it works in that favor. So with that analysis, Sport Illustrated putting a trans woman on their cover, and Victoria's Secret, and then Glamour also glamorizing that. It makes sense that if it's fashionable and the idea is there and the idea comes and aligns with the powers that be and their interests, then there's an interesting analysis there. But like what I'm trying to formulate is that Sports Illustrated, if you take out like the PSYOP, social constructionist point of view, and you imagine that there's a sexual component to Sports Illustrated. It's explicitly sexually oriented, that swimsuit issue. But they have to, now that they're accepting the critical social justice stuff, they have to promote really obese people. Martha Stewart has to be sexualized, like they sexualize the male. So there's that sexual...
you should really get a break after 80.
What?
But I feel like women should really get a break after 80. But
wait, get a break from being sexualized?
Yes.
You're waiting for the day, aren't you? I can't wait. I can't wait to be catcalled no more. But from the female point of view, Glamour, it's not a sexualization of that. It's a fashionation, right? It's like this fashionable idea. Like it's an elevation of that. Like what are women getting off on in celebrating transness and trans masculinity? Like what are they getting off on? Like is it because it's about liberation? They're watching like what are the psychological like mechanisms going on from the female point of view? Why are females so into celebrating trans women and trans men? Like that's one thing that just keeps on coming up, and again, it kind of destabilizes the feminist narrative about the patriarchy's doing this. It's like, no, women really get off on.
Women are certainly enthusiastic participants.
And not just the munchy stuff, not the motherhood stuff, but like, like all these major feminist organizations and NGOs are all like, they put men above women.
Yeah.
But it's also worth pointing out, as Corinna says, that essentially among both sexes, the foot soldiers, the TRA foot soldiers tend to be androphilic. So they tend to be gay men, and straight women tend to be the people who are not making a lot of money and probably don't know that much what's going on. The people who are making the serious money and really know what's going on at a strategic level are mainly straight men, but there are also quite a lot of lesbians. So you think of Nancy Kelly, quite a few of these surgeons are lesbian women, and a lot of these surgeons are straight guys. So it seems like the powerful people among both sexes like women, and the useful idiots are the gay men and the straight women. They're the ones who are, it seems. I think Corinna's right about that. I don't think that obviously there'll be exceptions, but it seems to me like the gay men are the kind of idiot foot soldiers in this, as are the straight women. Bluntly, does that ring true to you?
Yeah, it does. I hadn't thought it fit in an androphilic, gynophilic kind of a way.
So
when
twisted.
I think about what's going on with women.
Yeah.
When I think about what's going on with women, which I do think about a lot, just because women my age have gotten so beaten up by this, even though my sense is that we should have gotten a chance to I feel like women my age, we got indoctrinated with this in college. And that by that time you should have enough of a sense of yourself to be able to be like, okay, but this is just bullshit. And that's very different from being indoctrinated from like kindergarten. And yet so many have fallen for it, and I have to make sense of that somehow.
Your cohort, like your friend, you've lost a lot of friends because you question this. It's really has a stranglehold on the millennial woman.
It really does. I mean, I worked in the West Coast progressive nonprofit sector, so you can imagine how well that went for me. Yeah, one of the things that I think about, and this does not explain everything, but I think that it's an important context, is men are allowed to talk about being men without someone jumping on them every single time and say, but are you including trans men? And men are allowed to organize on behalf of men, men's health, other issues, without this trans inclusion being pushed on everything that they say. For women, this is not the case. So anytime a woman wants to talk about things that have to do with being female, they're either going to be devoted handmaidens or, more likely like actual trans-identified males who are there and demanding to be included and threatening you with social ostracization if you don't belong with it. And I think that, this started so early when it comes to the women's organizations, women's organizing generally, before the kind of menace of the movement was clear, that a lot of women went along with inclusion because there was an obvious price to be paid if you didn't. And you thought maybe you could get on with your work in a way that you would be constantly stopped and questioned every time you didn't make it clear that, men are also included. And that this has a way of, when you give in on small things, as I think a lot of women's organizations did, it has a way of binding you in the future because you have to justify why you did that. And of course, so it's much better to say, okay, I did this because it was the right thing to do, and not, I did this because I was a coward and I just wanted to be left alone. And, I kind of hoped that they would go away. I do think that that's an important context. And I even remember when I was starting to get really concerned about the gender stuff. This was in 2015, 2016. I would still write about, women's issues, women's bodies, these interests that I'd always had on my Facebook. And I would just never, ever, ever, ever touch the trans subject. And because I was kind of going to ground to give myself space to think about it. But I wasn't entirely allowed to do that because every time I posted about women, almost every time I posted about anything to do with women, friends of mine, colleagues of mine would respond on the post or would message me and would be, what about trans women? Or here are these resources where you could include this, or you could be more inclusive. I wasn't being given space.
Your colleagues?
Almost all women. Both? Almost all women. And it was always, it was usually in the form of a friendly tip and of course you must have just forgotten. And
do you think it was jealousy that you were writing successfully and that you were producing stuff and producing content and acting with intellectual confidence? And
I mean, it wasn't a writing success. It would be posting and writing about an article on a private Facebook page, Right,
but you still did something.
But
I take your point. You weren't. There wasn't a book launch. But do you know what I mean? Was it that thing of?
I don't know.
It has to be said, that very female thing of people who don't do anything, looking at people who do something and thinking, huh.
I don't really think that it was that, but I think that there is a way that this ideology hacks into female socialization, and that it lets you be, if you buy into it, it lets you be a little better than everybody else. And you still get a space to say something, and you get to correct other people. And it gives you this power.
Authority.
And it's this social power to kind of correct people. And my sense is that there's something that's particularly appealing about that to some women.
So the straight women do the correcting of the women and the gay men do the mockery of the women.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's the distribution of labor.
What do you mean about the gay men? Alasdair, can you expand on that?
Well, I guess I suppose you think of that there's a certain type of like completely think of that guy Adrian Harrop, or there's certain gay male figures in this who are very, very derisory towards they're very quick to jump to the height of derision. I think quicker than any woman would be. But then the women seems like the women are doing the policing and like the kind of stuff you're talking about in this whereas the gay men are sort of, I think, some of the nastier activists.
I think
but again, I would say
true.
idiot foot soldiers mainly. Not all, mainly. There are some making money out of it, but a lot of them are not making anything out of it. They think they are, but they're not.
I also think that, like, I read last year Julia Serrano's Whipping Girl, and then I read, like, it took, like, 3 months for me to read this fucking book.
Oh, no. Why? I'm going to say, can you say it into the microphone? The book?
So it's Histories of the Transgender Child.
By
Julian Gill Peterson. It took me months and months. I'm usually a pretty fast reader. It took me months and months to read this book because every page and a half I would run into literally the stupidest thing that I'd ever read in my life, supplanting the previous 1.5 pages. And I would have to put the book down and text my brother. And that is not an efficient way to read a book.
Why? What do you? Can you describe like the root logic that it's written under, and then why it's producing so much idiocy?
I mean, the root logic is it would be very convenient politically if there had always been transgender children, because then we would lose the ability to see this as a recent creation of like medical technology and ideology. So that is kind of the concept of the book. It is written by someone who has gone to I don't have an argument, but I have a thesaurus school of rhetoric. And he thinks that this isn't obvious to readers, but it should be. He talks a lot about the racial plasticity of the reservoir of racial plasticity that transgender children represent. No idea what that has to do with.
Our stuff, huh?
Yes, it's really
We're
out
adding
there.
the D to the acronym now.
And it's just like what I have learned from reading these books, both of which have been heavily recommended to me by female peers of mine, especially Whipping Girl, Jesus Christ, is that a lot of people do not have the intellectual self-confidence to read something and say, this is just bullshit. And the way that both of these books work is that it's the combination of like emotional manipulation. Like if you're a good person, Serrano is particularly explicit about this. If you're a good person, if you're a good feminist, you're going to go along with this because it's feminist. Like it's just this act of labeling. And they both express pity for the people who don't get it. And they both like just dress up.
Phallus.
They both engage in like, in what?
Phallus. Oh,
fallacies. I mean, they both engage in this attempted intellectual intimidation. And it shocks me how often it works, where they will use such, like, abstruse language and such tortured, truly, like, unbelievably tortured, sentence-level disasters, so that you don't get it, so that it doesn't make sense. And then they'll be like, oh, but if it doesn't make sense, you can still...
Yeah, right. You can't get it.
Or you diagram a sentence and you're like, oh, that's just bullshit. Apparently, this is very hard for a lot of people to say.
Okay.
Yeah, these 8 words just mean but. These next 12 words mean the thing I just said. These 18 words mean wasn't. Yeah. And then the average person's just like, I can't do it. Right.
Yeah, and this book goes back and forth in particular on like, they will pile up so many contradictions and not only not resolve them, but never acknowledge them. And this
what year is that book? If you don't mind asking.
This book is
90s?
2018.
2018.
2018.
Oh, wow.
So it's after Bronskill Evans. Oh, I should check that. But wasn't Bronskill Evans the invention of the
Bronskill Evans, I want to say, was like 2015.
Yeah, it was way before. I was going to say I was going to say 2016, but you're probably So it's using the term transgender child, which was of course Michelle Moore and Heather Bronskill Evans were the ones who actually pointed out the problem with that.
Yeah,
the big problem.
But there's something powerful about like you saying so many contradictory things and not resolving it, and also not acknowledging that there are contradictions, that it like, I think that for a lot of people, that's just becomes this like mental trap that you don't know how to get out of because you're trying to solve it. And there must be a way that it makes sense. There must be some plane on which it makes sense. And if you were smarter, or if you had done your homework better, like, you would resolve it, it would make sense. And so it becomes experienced as this like personal fault. Yeah.
I always think this about the gender wage gap thing, that there are these people who just have this belief that it's not a gender wage gap, it's a pregnancy wage gap.
Yes.
That there must be a way of resolving it. Why? Where's your God? Unless there's a God who's like, no, because I'm good and I won't let you suffer, then why? Why would it be the case that when we're so unfair that women have to bleed every month and have crazy hormones and all we have to do is orgasm, why would it be the case that there's going to be some kind of control over income? And it's so theist. And it's so theist, this belief that we must be able to find a transgender child.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Whipping Girl, back to Whipping Girl. Is that the one where, is that the person who just won the Pulitzer? And is that the one with that really egregious, like a woman is just an empty hole?
No, that was Andrea Longshue.
Okay.
We're going to need more context here. Well, that could have been a few people.
Yeah. Well, it's another trans woman writer who makes some pretty egregious, very, very misogynistic statements about demeaning and wanting to be a woman because a woman is that which is demeaned, basically thing. But Whipping Girl doesn't have that really dark sexual component to it.
It does. Yeah, it does.
So I'm sorry to bring it back here. I apologize, Eliza, because you're a very proper high-class woman. But if women are recommending it, like, there's got to be an erotic component of an image of the woman being demeaned and then like resurrected by the power of the male, like embodied, like kind of like a really perverse kind of rescuing of the dragon kind of thing, rescuing from the dragon womanhood itself.
It's not erotic. It's pseudo-erotic because
so it's empathetic. It's
because eroticism tends to be driven by men, and because women are too.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm inclined to say is,
isn't there like a 50 Shades of Trans thing going on here? Just a little bit, like some sort of sadistic, masochistic fantasy.
What I would say is that what Serrano and Gilles Peterson and Andrea Longshue and all of these other men are banking on is that a lot of women are masochists. And it turns out that a lot of women are masochists because they read this book and then they submit to it. That's what I would say.
You didn't need the second half of that sentence, just the reading it.
Yeah.
Well, and when you talk about the fact that there isn't a there isn't. It's not an argument. It's basically at the end of all of these books, it gets to go like, yeah. Well, so when you look at it like that, it's a very male silverback coming out telling you, like, this is what you should think. It's not actually an argument because there's a different way to go.
It's a pure assertion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard Grace Lavery interviewed by Corinna and Nina on the Heterodox.
Really?
Nina sent me a message the next day. She was like, I had to cycle 60 miles to get that out of my hair. Probably shouldn't have said that. Anyway, it's a very, very good interview. And that's the sense I came away with. Like, at some point, there was some moment where Grace Lavery, he said, like, basically, I genuinely believe that if a woman's on a desert island, she's not a woman because you can't be a woman, because being a woman is about being seen. And therefore, that would just be a person. And I would accept that person is female, but I wouldn't say that person's a woman. I thought, okay, no, you don't believe that. And frankly, he sounded kind of bored. Do you know what I mean? And there's something like, but you don't believe that. And we all know that you don't believe that. You're just, you're bringing the emotion, but you're not bringing anything else. And that's not always the case. Some people actually do make a fist of these ridiculous arguments.
Huh.
Yeah. No, the trans male academic is a particular type.
Walking indictment of academia.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. No, I need, like, I read this book and I need a vacation.
How does it end?
You do it so that we don't have to.
Yeah.
How does it end?
How does it culminate?
Let's see.
It's kind of a scholarly monograph, right? It's kind of like a dissertation type thing. It's not like doesn't have the same waveform as a novel, but budding transvestite. What?
Question mark.
Transvestite? Is that about the estrogen and the boob growth?
It's about a photograph of a child wearing clothes more typically associated with the other sex that's labeled a budding transvestite in somebody's medical files, and that's how it ends, with this very sweet little anecdote.
The millstones.
And was that the author?
No, I think he came to it later in life.
The operative word being came.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, yeah. So, the trans kid thing, like, why... Trans kid, like, why are women... Why does it hijack the female instinct? It's such a powerful idea. I think it's hijacking female instincts, and I think it's exploiting... I think it operates within the male desire to sexualize, but women aren't using it to sexualize children. They're using it to, like, rebirth their child. It's like, I gave birth to you, now I get to give birth to you again.
Well, it's control, isn't it?
It's control and it's creation, I think.
But it's an intentional creation. It's like the womb did all this work, and I just submitted to my womb. But now I get to use my will and my fashion sense to sculpt. Like what Jazz Jennings' mom is doing is deeply psychopathic, but it's still operating within the circuits of motherhood and the circuits of devouring mother.
Alasdair, say more about control. Sorry. I said say more about control.
Like a constant tether. It's like the umbilical cord gets to wrap around a couple more times.
Yeah. One of the things I would like to see, and we can't get it because reasons, all of the usual reasons, is I'd love to see data on basically trans housings by proxy mothers. So activist mothers who are transing their kids, and birth order, because I strongly think there would be some interesting data in there, probably a lot about youngest boys and probably a lot about oldest girls. So there's the phenomenon, I can hear Stella in my ear, kind of, she's not literally in my ear, saying the mother is always blamed, but there is the phenomenon of the younger son being kept by the controlling mother, the helicopter parent, and there's also the phenomenon of the oldest daughter being kind of savaged by the mother, right? And then the other kids slowly getting easier, and these would be things that a lot of people would recognize. Well, not necessarily, but a lot of people. So I wonder whether that's, and so those are both control mechanisms, right? Scything down your daughter because you see her turning into a young woman, and that's causing all sorts of things for you, which is very natural. It's all mothers are going to have that reaction. And then also the loss of the son. And, with Jazz, I don't know where Jazz Jennings is in the birth order.
He's the youngest. And he seems to have had a big sister who he adored and tried to emulate.
Right, and that whole family very, very clearly reeks of one of you little bastards is going to make us some money one way or another, right? Yeah.
It's such a tangled mess that it's no wonder that heterosexual men are kind of late to the party. Ironically, there's this perennial, like, Daily Wire, like, chest thumping, and then the feminist backlash. They're like, we're starting a movement. Like, we're the ones who started this movement with this movie, and then the GC women are like, wait, what? Like, we've been, like, at the forefront. We've been the ones who've been bashing in. But it just, from a normie level, like, men just, like, it's so complex that, like, I understand why it's taken so long, and all they really have is mockery. Like, this is stupid, or they go towards, this is the erosion of society kind of stuff. But because we've already accepted all these other steps towards here, we're not a part of the conversation. But when you get into the weeds, it's just so complex for a normie man. Like, the fathers, where are the fathers in this stuff? They're like, I don't know what's going on with my daughter.
Well,
I don't know what's going on with my son.
You can see that there's certainly a sex-based element to all of that, and there's a very interesting question, which is why are 96% of people in the parent support community mothers and 4% fathers, which is the figure we have. But I would also argue there's another component to it, which is idiot academics, because you'll see somebody say something like, some person who obviously has just woken up to this, really obviously, and they'll come online and say like, hey, this is BS. There's only two genders. And what we should say is, yeah, brilliant. Go and look at that video of this detransitioner. It's really harrowing. And instead, we go into some anal, weird, flappy, uncontrolled, there's a difference between sex and gender. No one cares. The average person doesn't care about the theoretical distinction between sex and gender. I'm sorry, I will die on this hill, and they never, ever will. And so there's part of it, which is that you can't expect men or women who are not kind of that critical theory, academic bent to want to go into any kind of campaign where every word they use is going to be picked apart and problematized. I mean, look at the level of problematizing of language that gender critical people do. It's extraordinary. Yeah. I've never seen anything like it in my life, that you almost can't say a sentence without it being someone will object to some word. You said trans, you didn't say trans.
You used the wrong pronouns.
So you can't expect normies to get into that, because it just feels like opening a room full of people who tell you you're wrong.
And so the Daily Wire vector into this is to just completely pare down the language and like go after Bud Light and Target,
Right.
Just go after them. And like, this is wrong. Just say this is wrong. And like, it was, when we go into the porn debate, and it's a big debate and it's a difficult conversation for a lot of different reasons, but I had Ayla and Megan Murphy on my channel and it was a train wreck, but Megan did make a point, like, there's no amount of data that you can show me that will convince me that this isn't just wrong. This is just wrong. It's terrible for everybody involved. It's demeaning of women. It's demeaning for the user. And there's something really refreshing about that. And it's kind of counter to our liberalism to just not make an argument and say, no, this is just wrong. It's wrong. And we're not going to deal with it. We're not going to go along with it. And we're going to say, fuck you to anybody who's trying to push this on us. And that is the normie level vector. And the arguments and the subtleties of it will always be sidelined to that. And I guess that's where the pendulum swing kind of thing comes in, to the whole movement and stuff.
So it all then becomes about information, because it's the level of information that some people will need to go from the normal response being, that person's critical, that sounds like hatred and intolerance, in the parts of the world where that would be a normal assumption, to the normal assumption being something different. And yeah, I'm aware I don't live in one of the parts of the world where the normal assumption would be you're a transphobic bigot. So I have great sympathy for people who've lost friends and all the rest of it, because I never did.
Okay.
It sounds like you had quite a shift in your life.
Yeah.
Eliza. Yeah.
I mean, I lost fewer friends than I expected, but it was also, I mean, there's really nothing that prepares you for the experience of having someone who knows you very well and knows you not to be a hateful, terrible person, and for them to start treating you like you're radioactive. And like, I had this one friend, and I think we'd been friends for 8 years and had talked every day, had traveled together, like all kinds of, like a very close friend. And our friendship fell apart over the course of about one conversation.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I wrote her a long letter that was like, I think you want to do the right thing here. I'm not sure that you've done your homework to know what the right thing is. And here's why, like, I think about this the way that I do, since we didn't actually talk about any of those things before you cut me off. And her response to that was, every time that you try to talk to me about this, I'm going to donate $500 to a trans kid charity in your name.
Wow.
Yeah. So rich girl. Yeah. But no, it was this fascinating, and I still don't know how to interpret that gesture. Like, is she absolving herself of the guilt of listening to like wrong think? Is she trying to just shut me up? Yeah. But
well, or both. Yeah.
Both. Yeah. But it's like, if you try to warn me about this, I will fund the thing that you were warning me about.
Or not even shut you up, just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. I don't want to know, I can't hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember also, like, I remember that I had asked her so many questions, and that the times that she responded to me, like, she never had a single question.
Mm-hmm.
Including when, you know, I mean, those are pretty serious things that I had written about, where it's like, I don't know, some natural questions might have been like, what do you mean when you say that we're sterilizing children? I would want to know that if I didn't.
Yep.
And you just feel that there must be this extreme cognitive dissonance and this terror of information that would lead you to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah.
Because she just couldn't touch
and that
it.
probably would lead you, right? Because you have to have some belief that that would be the probable outcome, not a, well, I don't know, maybe, but like a minority outcome. But you've got to think that's a real risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if either of you read Cheslam Milo's The Captive Mind, about his experiences in communist Poland, and like all of his friends who were fellow intellectuals and writers who kind of, all of the different paths by which they reconciled themselves with communism. And he writes profiles, and I'm very tempted to write a version of that because I love him and because
you should do that.
Yeah.
You should totally do that. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
You should do that as a series. Like, number one,
he calls them, like, you know, alpha, beta, whatever, goes through, I think, 4 or 5 different friends of his, and like, how did they convince themselves?
I'd love somebody to. So when I wrote about the parents of the boys I met, I noticed that a lot of the boys had this figure in their life who I called the cheerleader, who was a very influential, socially, what would you say, like socially, I've lost the term, you know, high social status kind of young woman. And it's really interesting that all of the mothers of the boys really profoundly disliked those girls' mothers.
Okay.
And profoundly disliked them and called them rich, spoiled princesses. So I'd love to see somebody do a profile of the cheerleader, like maybe your former friend who was the I will give 500, maybe that's like the type of cheerleader. It's that kind of, there's something in there about affluence, and there's something in there about confidence and
there's
social
also just
status.
Something in there about, I mean, the performance of the donation. Yeah. And I mean, even before our friendship broke up, like, if somebody had been like, you know, who is your shallowest friend? Like, now it would be hard for me to think of who that would be, but at the time it would have been like, well, it's definitely her. Like, so she just, it was very obvious to me that it was performative, and that, like, I remember the time of like the North Carolina bathroom bills, and she organized this fundraiser to send like yellow Kool-Aid to lawmakers for $10 like bottles of yellow Kool-Aid that look like urine.
Oh, that looked like urine. Okay.
Yes. So she didn't go nearly as far as the men protesting against like the Equality and Human Rights Commission have gone. I think that was really urine.
There's
That's
a very,
the male,
very
female.
interesting.
Yeah. Male pour, save up the pee and pour it on themselves. Women just make Kool-Aid and send it to the mail.
Yeah.
But there is a universal thing that somebody, I think it was Douglas Murray, pointed this out, that a lot of these incredibly posh, as we would say posh, or like, you know, wealthy, frankly, young people, It's funny, isn't it, how their protest seems to include somebody working class cleaning up mess.
It really does.
For all of their self-righteousness, they really, really enjoy watching women mop up sour milk and paint. Usually women, but also men. Do you know what I mean?
Soup.
And there is something about that, like the au pair made me angry and I had a right to, and you should side with me because I'm your child, not the au pair. There's something about that which is just so delicious and awful, but the love of mess that they have.
Yeah, and that someone else will always clean it up. I think that's very perceptive.
Yeah. Yeah, he was right about that.
Something I think about a lot is something my mom said when I was a kid about a coworker of hers who had gone crazy for some other reason. And she was like, you know, she's definitely drinking Kool-Aid. And I think she was mixing the Kool-Aid. And I think about that.
Well,
yeah.
how long ago was that friendship ended?
It ended about a month into the pandemic. So 3 years. Yeah. At one point, she accused me of not missing her. And it was like, it's very, like, you learn a lot about people through this, things that you didn't want to know often. And with things like that, it's like, yeah, it does make you reinterpret, like, were we ever friends if it could possibly end that way? And once you reflect on that, you don't miss that person. Because I would never have treated anyone in my life that way.
No, because you didn't need to. She probably felt she needed to. Not to make excuses, but you know what I mean?
know.
That's what's so sad about it.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I don't, like, what would I miss?
It's going to be very interesting as people start to get it over the coming however long it's going to take.
Yeah.
It
will be.
Yeah.
Alasdair?
Probably.
How's your health?
Yeah.
It seems all right.
Yeah. We did an episode, but I'd like to just fold that into this one.
Okay.
So you got news. Things are developing. So.
Yeah. So, how much background do you want me to give?
Oh yeah. Well,
Not
so like a year ago or about, you were diagnosed with one of the bigger stages of cancer.
Stage 3.
Stage 3.
It's since escalated to stage 4.
Stage 4.
So I'm now in immunotherapy. So if immunotherapy doesn't work, there really isn't a treatment. And then what we mean by immunotherapy working has 2 phases. One actually has to shrink your tumors, and most people it doesn't work. It doesn't shrink the tumor at all. So 60% of people who are eligible, which is only a quarter of people in the first place, it doesn't work. And 40% of people, it does work. And then within that, you have a small subset of people who can actually seem to stay alive for some time. And it worked. I'm in the 40%.
So your tumors
not
are
60%.
Are shrinking.
The biggest tumor has gone from basically 4.5 centimeters to 2.3 on its longest axis. And so one of the things is, which I told you in that recording, it was a bit close to the appointment. So I was still kind of, I didn't realize how bad things had got. She did tell me, but the thing is, it's really interesting thinking about responsible healthcare. Like, they can't terrify you. They can't pin you to a chair and be like, okay, you have 6 tumors. So they tell you like detail about the worst thing so that they're not deceiving you. But they also, so there was stuff that she told me, but then when I went back last time, I kind of went, oh, that's what that means. So I'd had quite a lot more tumorous growth in various parts of my body than I thought. And they've all shrunk or disappeared, which means that it's working, and I'm at the top end of the better end of working as well. But past performance is not a guarantee of future performance in this case. and it could turn around. The only issue I have at the minute is just the psychological terror of pain, because in the last week, my pain levels, pain had basically disappeared, and now it's come back. So then you're like, oh my God, it's failed, because in 80% of cases, this will fail. Now, it was 92%. And then I was one of the 40%, so therefore it's now, I've got an 80% chance of failing rather than a 92% chance of failing. So it's getting better, it's going in the right direction. But so the terror of the pain, feeling pain and then being like, okay, so what does that mean? It's quite difficult to manage. That's the worst aspect of it. And there's no point in talking to anyone about it in particular because, unless I'm going to save up for my own personal CAT scanner, because they're only like 3 million quid, then I'm just going to have to put up with the fact that it's only every 3 months I will find out what's going on.
Okay.
But it worked.
Then your pains decreased and returned and... Sorry?
Huh?
What did she called you?
Yeah, the consultant called me because she couldn't wait to tell me, basically, that it worked, which is really nice. So it looks like I'm at the upper end, but, they're very, very careful with language. They don't... Because I want numbers. I'm desperate for numbers. Like, I want to know where I am in my cohort. This is why I'd be terrible if I was like a marathon racer. I'd just stop all the time to see where everyone else was. And I'd be like, oh, now I've lost. So yeah, it's okay. I think also another thing was that, like, there was so much which went on in April and it was so busy and stuff, and that maybe that just kind of takes your mind elsewhere. And I definitely had a big slump after everyone left. I think we all had a big slump, like a big mental health slump after that event, one way or another. I don't know. Like, it was really intense. And then, like, I think, so the whole of, like, mid-May, just after my birthday, I was kind of, like, really down. Like, do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but other than that, I won't know. I've just got to keep on going in every 3 weeks, and I won't know anything else until August.
And any other reactions to this immunotherapy for you?
I think so. I had Mark had a cold, and I always make fun of him because he's pathetic when he has a cold and he lies in bed and goes,
Does he have man flu?
Yeah, he's complete man flu. It's pathetic. So, and I've never had, I must have had the flu because I'm in my 40s, so I must have had the flu, but I've never really suffered. I've never had one of those. So he had this thing and I just mercilessly mocked him for 2 days. And then, oh boy, I got this, whatever it is, cold or flu, and I was walloped. Like, I was in bed for 5 days. I've never had to go to bed because of cold, ever in my life. And I've still got it. It's lasted like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I think that might be, there's no way of knowing, but I never suffer with coughs and colds, flu and headaches and stuff like that. It just doesn't happen. And this thing massively hit me. And I've heard people say that about immunotherapy. Kind of rings true, right? Because if your immune system is doing all the things it normally does, like creating mucus, as soon as you get any kind of infection. So I've been doing lots of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And other than that, the only thing is if things keep working and if things keep going well, then I found out that probably in about a year I could be eligible for stoma reversal surgery, which is the big goal.
What is that?
It's to get rid of my stoma.
So, going back to pooping out your butt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a traditionalist.
Yeah.
I'm not going to apologize for it, Benjamin. We've been vilified too long. Yes, going back to pooping out of my butt. But I'm not eligible till next year, basically. It's kind of, there's not much point in doing it until I know whether things are stable.
Okay.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Benjamin?
Oh, that life is really weird.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Gives you
So can you-
unexpected things.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about Denver?
About what?
About Denver? Or are
Denver
we not
in
supposed
November?
to talk about it?
I can't tell you that much more. I can say that we're having a conference. I can say it will
Okay.
be roughly on the 4th to 5th, excuse me, of November. Don't book tickets yet. Don't book your tickets yet, because we will have much more specific information. So there will be a release of lots of tasty information relatively soon.
Okay.
Relatively soon. Not far off.
You gonna try to
I'm
make
doing
it,
the
Eliza?
artwork right now.
Yeah. You're gonna be there, right,
Yeah.
Alasdair?
Yeah.
And Eliza? You're gonna be there?
I would like to. Also, I probably can't resist going to USPAP again.
It's like this weird little
Will
addiction
they
you
not
have
see
now.
you on the way in? Are they not aware of?
I don't think that they. I remember before EPATH, I was like, it's possible now that somebody could recognize me. And then as soon as I got there, it was just like, no, that's ridiculous.
You know, an awful lot of people at WPATH have watched the whole of the GenSpec conference.
Okay. How do you know that?
I just know that.
Okay.
I want to see the documents. I want to see the forum threads. I want to see the comments. I want to see the reactions.
It's been seen and it's been noticed.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that may end soon. Your ability to slip in and out of rooms.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as other people have pointed out to me, I could always shave half of my head and dye the other half, and then I could make it.
This is like naming and shaming the surgeon. Why are we pretending that we're doing something? It gets to you. Do you know what I mean? You develop these behavior patterns, and then you think, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, with WPATH and EPATH both, it was like, I'm not doing anything, I didn't misrepresent myself. I'm a grad student. I study this.
Right.
I'm sincerely interested, I assure you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it does rather undercut the super fun spy part. But yeah, there's legitimacy to being there as yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Friends,
I'd like to see the way that they see you.
do you know how they
What do
see
you
you? Yeah. Do you know, Eliza, how they see you? No. A wicked witch?
Do you want to know?
Terrible person?
What?
Alasdair knows.
What?
No. I was just wondering, do you want to know? Your reaction was like, no, I can't. I don't want to think about how they see you.
I'd be curious. I think I looked WPATH was much more activisty, and I stood out much more there, and EPATH was much more professionalish.
Despite the genocide.
Despite the genocide. Yeah. If we could just bracket the genocide, then we could say it was more professional.
You
What were
know,
you
that
going to say,
statement
though?
applies to so many things in European history.
Yeah. It was the best of
If you
times.
set
it
the
was-
genocide aside.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Me?
Me, nothing.
Okay.
Him?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say thank you very much, both of you, for returning to my channel. It's always great to have you on, and it's great to pair you up. And Eliza's Substack will be linked in the description, and Alasdair is now out on Twitter, so that will finally be in the description, and you can go and follow his spicy takes.
Okay.
His rantings
I'm
and
not sure
ravings.
there's much in the way of spicy takes.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, you need to get on that, brother.
Okay, I'll do my best. It was a pleasure. It was really nice to do this with you, Eliza. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was lovely to see you guys.
Thanks, Benjamin.
Boop.